It's all in the push for free, fair, credible elections over the years. But what are the chances that this will see the light of day before the elections ahead? Chamberlain.
Well, yeah, we're going to take a look at that, the plan to create this National Commission on Electoral Offences. And two gentlemen, as you may have seen in that slide, join us this morning to shed light on the matter. Honourable Eneke Nomana is a member, Committee on Media and Public Affairs. He's here with us in the studios. And then we'll have Afam Osigwe, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. He joins us virtually. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Let me start with you, Honourable Nomana. You heard divergent views about this in the House, so perhaps you could just give us the thinking of your colleagues in the House about this bill. Do they think it's really a worthy cause to go ahead in light of how something maybe not?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain and Malcolm, and thank you, Channels TV, for having me this morning. In my opinion, I think it is a very important piece of proposed legislation for our country. I think at the time that we are fine-tuning the electoral processes, at the time that we are hoping that the country will come up with a credible electoral system that we can say that be clean, something Nigerians can believe in, we cannot isolate or run away from the issue of how to properly prosecute electoral offenders. And we all know that elections in Nigeria have been characterized by violence, offenses, ballot snatching, vote buying, and all sort of things. So those are the issues this bill intends to cure. And as you are aware, it's a consolidation of about 4 private member bills and championed by the chairman of the Electoral Committee in the House, Honorable Aisha Duku, who's done a good job of putting all of this together, and alongside the Senate bill, the one that was approved by the Senate, which has come to the House for concurrence. So I think a good job has been done so far. And a public hearing was held yesterday, and if you listen to the speech made by the Deputy Speaker, who represented the Speaker, and of course the Chairman of the committee, Aisha Duku, she took time to allay all of these fears. She highlighted some of the instances and examples of electoral offenses, and of course the responsibility of INEC. INEC is overwhelmed. From 2011 only, INEC is saddled with over 870 cases. Can INEC truly handle those things or prosecute them? The answer is no. People may also say, yeah, at the time that the country is thinking of reducing the number of agencies or reducing cost of governance, why think of another commission? Some commissions are more important than others.
So what does the House think about that, or some members think about that?
That is why I'm saying it's a consolidation of private member bills. So if 4 people came up with the same bill, it therefore suggests that it's something of interest to many. And of course, when it came up for second reading on June 30th, it was overwhelmingly supported. It went through the second reading. So our members think it's important. Nigerian electorates think it's important, and I think politicians themselves and critical institutions and civil society organizations think it's important. So we must harness all these views together and see how we can fine-tune and continue to better the electoral process in Nigeria.
Right. Mr. Osigwe, now having listened to Honorable Nomana, and then would you, for those who worry or raise concern about duplicity of laws, especially concerning prosecution of electoral offenders, do you think they got a huge concern here? Are they valid concerns?
First of all, I think that the creation of a special court to create electoral offenses is unnecessary, is uncalled for, and it should not concern us at this time. Now, we keep advocating for the creation of courts, institutions, without caring about the financial implications of these bodies. in our lean finances. I read newspaper reports that suggested that the federal government may have borrowed over 4 trillion naira to finance, over 3 trillion naira to finance deficit in its budget as at April 2022. The audited report of the World Bank rated Nigeria as the 5th most indebted country with a debt stock of over $11 billion. And we are borrowing to finance our budget, borrowing to finance so many things. And we're sitting down thinking about creating yet another court that will put in place another bureaucracy. And we keep amending laws. Our legislature keep amending laws as if electoral issues are much more important than the lives and the welfare of the people. One would have expected this National Assembly to be interested in making laws that enhance the security and welfare of the people, considering their situation we face in many parts of this country. Whether 4 persons came up with this bill should not be our concern. What should be the priority of the National Assembly? To increase security. Now, the value of the Naira has been on a slide, a downward slide. People cannot travel to so many places. What laws are we putting in place to ensure or to enhance the ability of the law enforcement agencies to look into these issues? It's always election. And like what in the video played in the run-up to this discussion, one of their colleagues said, election is seasonal. Of course that it is seasonal. So when there are no more electoral offenses to be tried, what would this court be doing? How many cases have actually been tried by the bodies that can try them now? Some of the reports you get are only about EFCC prosecuting these cases because of money laundering elements of the electoral offenses. And we keep creating courts because people feel they can pass law, they have enough majority to do them. Of what use is it to the society? We amend our constitution to make it easy for pre-election matters to be concluded within time. We neglect the economy. We neglect to do things and amend our laws to ensure that we get foreign direct investment. Nobody will come to invest in Nigeria because we keep amending our laws to make it easier for politicians to contest elections or for electoral offenses to be prosecuted. Nobody will invest in an environment that is considered unsafe. Nobody will invest in an environment where it's not easy for you to repatriate whatever money you make from the investment. And I think the National Assembly should be a bit more, should sit up and focus on issues that are much more important than some of these issues they keep chasing after. Special courts for what? How many of these cases have been taken to the regular courts and the regular courts failed to do anything about them? Why must we keep creating things and creating things?
If I may come in, I would like to ask you, for you as a lawyer, how weighty do you think that electoral offenses are? Because some people say that these are offenses that can undermine, they have the ability to undermine our entire system, our entire democracy, and that we should be able to take punishment of this sort of offenses very seriously, that they deter people from wanting to participate in the process. So for you, do you agree with the description of this description of electoral offenses? If you don't, how weighty do you think that electoral offenses are?
Now, I'm not suggesting that electoral offenses should be treated with levity. But I'm saying all the ones that have been committed over the years, how many of them have been taken to court? How many of them have been investigated or prosecuted? How many persons who even the tribunals, electoral tribunals, have found to have rigged the elections or committed various electoral offenses have been tried and have been charged to court or even investigated beyond what transpired at the election tribunal?
Isn't that precisely why we need an electoral offenses commission?
Why do you think?
Because INEC says that they are overwhelmed.
Why do you? Because we keep making laws for the wrong reasons. Why should INEC be saddled with the responsibility of investigating and prosecuting electoral offenses? What is the police there for? What are the law enforcement agencies there for, if not to do these things? How many have been taken to the existing regular courts? Have we shown that the regular courts have failed to justify the need for that court now called special? The Federal High Court started as a Federal Revenue Court. Today it has transmitted into a multi-jurisdictional court. The National Industrial Court has come on board to treat labor matters now has become so formalized that even the poor person, saved from his job, who should ordinarily be able to walk into this court to litigate his matter, cannot do that without the involvement of lawyers. And lawyers have come with the same formalized mode of doing things in our various high courts into the national industrial courts, that the idea of creating it, which is to speed up trials, is not working out. Why don't we focus on amending our laws, our rules of court,
all right,
to ensure that when they are taken to court, move at the pace they should move?
All right.
Why don't we focus on the things that are much more important? The security and lives of the welfare of people undermine the security of our nation more than electoral offenses. People are dying.
All right.
What laws are the National Assembly making to make it easier?
Let's have Mr. Mana respond to some of those issues you raised. Well, you heard him there about how he thinks, well, we may be focusing on the wrong things at the moment.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. The distinguished senior advocate has made his point, and of course, everyone is concerned about the security situation, so there is no question about not being bothered. We are bothered as a people. The National Assembly has been in the forefront of advocacy and the forefront of putting up actions and move to ensure that the security agencies are empowered. Everything that has to do with security has been done, has been given some expedited passage in terms of finances, in terms of requests and all of that will aid security in this country. The Speaker is, the Honourable Speaker of the House of Representatives has not paid lip service to anything security. He takes it upon himself. He's met severally, he's intervened at various levels, and whatever has to do with security has been taken very seriously by this National Assembly, and it's a major concern. But again, it is not the responsibility of the National Assembly to implement those security day-to-day work. Ours is that of lawmaking and giving support to the executive.
But I think part of his point is that we're going about this the wrong way, trying to create special courts, because he says, did we even backtrack, for instance, all of those court cases which you also mentioned, which INEC is burdened with, how many of them have actually been taken to court to warrant us saying, look, we need special courts? You
had INEC saying that they have no capacity to handle this. From 2011, 870,000 cases. One agency that's saddled with election management.
Yeah, so here's one is, why do we have to saddle INEC with that responsibility? Because you also heard in that same briefing, the rep of the EFCC says that the EFCC, the ICPC, I think the police also, they've got extant laws to investigate some of these cases. In fact, some of them are being investigated by those bodies.
Yeah, but I think it's a question of capacity. It still boils down to capacity.
Capacity of what? Of INEC or those agencies?
No, capacity of those agencies. Look at the number of polling units.
Okay, so if it's a question of capacity,
in the entire country.
Yeah, so why is the House
of our police?
Why is the House not thinking about strengthening or enhancing their capacity as opposed to creating special?
No, because of the specialized nature of these issues. And we must also understand that the cross of leadership emanates from the electoral process and the kind of elections that we have, the kind of leaders that we produce. So nobody can say to me, in my opinion, that anything that will fine-tune the electoral process and give confidence to the process and to the outcome of elections and to Nigerians and make Nigerians see the need to follow the law in terms of elections and election management is less important. No, I think it's important enough.
But
did we not have the police when the EFCC was established?
If I understand this point,
did we not have the police? Well, it's because some of these issues are specialized.
When he was asked the question by Mark, he says, look, he's not saying that we should trivialize or shouldn't give it the pride of place, but the method, the way we're going about it, is not the right way. They're two different things.
No, what is the method? There is a proposed law. And it's about Nigerians. That's why there was a public hearing. You know how the legislature works. It's not because a bill has come on, therefore it automatically becomes a law. No. That's why Nigerians want to make input. That's just like he's making input. The learned senior advocate has every right to make the input he's making. We have our own right to make our own input. Nigerians did yesterday. We listened to various shades of opinion. You listen to INEC, we listen to EFCC, we listen to various, of course, civil society organizations. So in the baking of this bill that will become law, possibly in future, various shades of opinions will be harnessed in. So the majority of the opinion that come in support means that it will become, it will get passed.
Maybe we should get
Otherwise,
more
if that is not the case,
Mr.
it's not just about the lawmakers. No,
okay.
It's not about the lawmakers. That's why a public hearing was held yesterday.
Right. Mr. Sigwe, so what would you rather have, how would you have the House or the National Assembly approach this matter?
Now, he has talked about over 700,000 cases being investigated. I didn't hear that the investigation has been concluded. He could not give us the figure of how many of these cases that have been stored in court and for how long. He could not also say that the courts are proved to be unable to handle the sheer magnitude of these cases, assuming they exist and where they exist. It worries me that we elect men and women into the legislature who create an institution without giving us a projection of what it would cost the government to provide infrastructure for this court, for personnel, for so many things in the next 5 years, for example, and the impact on the economy and the impact on our already bad financial situation. You provide courtrooms, you provide vehicles, you employ people, you provide for the things you need to run for this cause. People just sit down and think, oh, let me be able to report to my constituency that I sponsored a bill. And then because you can get your colleagues to agree with you, then you pass first, second reading, maybe in one day, then pass it in the very next day, and then you leave the society with the burden of these laws you create. Let him show me to what extent the police has been interested in investigating electoral offences and charging them to court. Let him provide the figures. Let him show how the current court system cannot handle these cases to provide the need for there to be a special court to handle electoral offences. So if we can't answer these questions, we should focus on other things and not this.
All right,
and
so
I insist,
okay, go ahead. Were you about to make a point of what you'd rather have us do?
That we cannot every morning we wake up and think that a particular thing needs a special court. We suddenly rush into court and pass a law to that thing. We are becoming a nation of a court for everything. Some people say there should be a special court for corruption cases. There should be a special court for this. Tomorrow there will be a special court for we continue things that we have better problems to address. Can't we expect more? Can this National Assembly look at Chapter 2 of the Constitution and look at the issues to prioritize? Can this National Assembly look at Section 14(2)(b), which says that security and welfare of the people should be the primary aim of government? To what extent are laws being made to fit into those sections so that people will have a better life?
Okay, so Mr. Sigwe, now, you've spoken about how they need to show you or let Nigerians know that there is indeed a need to create special courts. But now that we're at this point, if we need to strengthen the process and ensure that we address the question of electoral offences or reduce it to the barest minimum, if not to eliminate it completely, what would you have us do or the National Assembly do to address that particular challenge?
Now, a number of improvements were introduced into the Electoral Act 2022 to ensure that there's democracy in the political parties. The myriad of cases have come up after the primaries for the 2022 general election shows that failure to imbibe democratic culture is at the root of this thing. If also there is no accountability, if people feel they can get away with anything, impunity, if the law enforcement agencies would rather pander to the whims and caprices of politicians rather than do their work. So we must employ the right persons in the police force, equip them, detach, insulate the law enforcement agencies from politics. So irrespective of the party in power in any particular state, to do their duty the way they're supposed to. That is the first starting point. If we want people to have a credible electoral process that you do not need to snag ballot box or try to hack into the BVAC or any other thing that is to conduct the election, those are starting points. Or try to falsify results. And where we ensure that actions have consequences. Because politicians will tell you, just get declared winner and leave the rest, let us go into court. It's better to be the person in power, fighting
All right.
the petitioner trying to unseat you than to be the one declared the loser. This winner takes it all mindset. If we do things, if we imbibe the spirit of the laws and the law enforcement agencies work, and the courts are allowed to do their work without being blamed, implicitly being blamed for failing, when the court's ability to handle these cases has not been put to a test.
All right, Mr. Sigwe, just a moment. Mr. Madonwa, you respond, but let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos who's got questions for you lot. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Let me begin with Mr. Sigwe. Well, there are some of the things that you have said, just only remind me of some agencies of government that have been either created or extracted from an existing agency to serve some other purposes. For instance, the Nigerian police. Part of the functions of the Nigerian police is to detect crimes and prevent the crimes. But the EFCC was created to focus on financial crimes. Crime is crime. Though some would say, okay, well, the functions of the police was, a bit of it was extracted and given to EFCC, and a law was set up accordingly. There are those who would also look at the police, the same police, and look at the functions of traffic control, traffic management and all. It would seem like we weren't doing that well enough, so we created the FRSC, and then there is, so many other agencies like that. Look at also the Code of Conduct Bureau and Code of Conduct Tribunal. It would seem like these functions, they were just literally drilled down to ensure that we're able to focus on the crucial issues that affect some of the matters that concern us in society. So if we do the same thing that we did with the EFCC and the CCB, CCT, is there any crime in that? Wouldn't that help the process better?
Again, I didn't get your question at the end of it.
Well, you heard the comparisons that I made with those other agencies, but now INEC is saying, well, we have a law, okay, that says we should do this, but we are overwhelmed. We can't really do it ourselves. Let's extract this particular function as it was extracted from the police, for the EFCC, and some other issues like that. What's wrong with that?
See, that the INEC said it is overwhelmed with the power given to it to investigate and prosecute does not equate to a request to create a court. Carrying out the duty of investigating and taking the matter to court is different from which court should handle these cases. And that's what we're talking about. They want to set up a special court to try electoral offenses. Now, this same power that has been given to INEC can as well be carried out by the police, because like you've said, the duty of the police is to detect, prevent, investigate crimes.
Police has not been able to do that.
This?
That's the challenge.
And I challenge Honorable Mana to show that the courts, the existing courts, have proved incapable of handling these cases to justify the need for a special court.
If the EFCC, just a second, Mr. Sigwe, just a second. Let's have this conversation. If the police...
I have a bit of a problem hearing you very well, sir.
Well, can you at least hear me a bit better now? Can you hear me well?
It's a bit better, yeah.
Okay. If the police couldn't sufficiently, persuasively, excuse me, handle financial crimes, consequently, EFCC was created. If the law that set up the CCB also set up the CCT, while some collect and investigate some things, and that the Code of Conduct Bureau recognizes that these things are faulty, they transfer it to the tribunal. What's wrong with doing that same thing for our elections?
I'm glad you keep referring to the Code of Conduct Tribunal. I thought I could ignore it, but since you keep going back to it, how many cases have been prosecuted by the Code of Conduct Tribunal? How many? Except for the few occasions where certain sensational cases make it into these headlines. How many cases? Do you have an idea how much that body drains from our public finances? Do you have any idea? You can't even get a declaration from the Public Bureau, Code of Conduct Bureau. And these are things that should aid the fight against corruption. EFCC and ICPC were created because EFCC especially because of a request by the FAT, Financial Action Task Force. but nothing even said it must be an independent agency. In some other countries, bodies like the EFCC, equivalent of bodies like the EFCC, are somewhat affiliated to the police. You can't point out to a country that has created a special court for electoral. Any serious
Mr. Sigwe, just one second.
You can only find it if it exists in a third world country.
Are you by any way suggesting that the functions of the CCT be merged with the CCB?
I don't know why I keep having a problem hearing you very well.
Can you hear me better now?
It gets better then. But go ahead.
Interesting.
I'll listen very well.
Okay. Are you by any chance suggesting that the functions of the CCB and the CCT be merged into one agency?
Because that is not the main subject of discussion. I made reference to that to show how we create bodies that we don't really feel their impact in the society. There are so many agencies for crop science, agency for fruits, agency for this. You only hear once in a while and don't get to see what they do. And they have an entire bureaucracy. Every day they defend the budget, money is released, and people are somewhere embezzling for public funds out of the eyes of the public without adding positively to the life of the society. And we're embarking on the move again to create special courts. And I bet you some person already be warming up for appointment. Don't worry, we'll create it, you'll be appointed a judge there. Don't worry, we'll create it, you're appointed a chief registrar. Then we'll create it and you do this. It's more sometimes also more about like job for the boys. We have 37 high courts of states, 36 states and FCT. We have the federal high court. Show me that these courts cannot handle these cases. And that is how people pass laws. You bring empirical evidence. This number of cases were this courts are overwhelmed because they are so there's need to not have this. We don't have these details. Nothing. 4 individuals, honorable members, of course.
Well, senior advocate, let's see.
Very fast to create it.
Senior Advocate Sigwe, let's see if yet again Honorable Mana will be able to puncture some of your arguments. But I'd like to take Honorable Mana a bit back in time, to the origins of the bill and how it has had a long lifespan, since 2016. I recall Honorable Dieg, complaining that he was the initial proponent of the bill and he was stood down without any serious justification. And in fact, this bill has had an input also from a member of the upper chamber, the Senate. And if I could add to that also, the House leader sought to know why he was not consulted about it being incorporated to move for the second reading of the bill. So it seems as if there's a lot of interest, in this bill. What is the reason for it now gaining, what really is the reason for the new momentum on the bill to establish an Electoral Offences Commission?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Go ahead,
yes,
Honorable Mana.
I think all of those were resolved through the process of consolidation. If you listened earlier, I said that there was a consolidation of 4 private member bills and that from the Senate. So all the issues raised were resolved through that consolidation. Yes, you mentioned Honorable John Day. Yes, there was also Honorable Uduyok, and of course the House leader. I was in the Parliament. I was in the sitting on that particular day. So that was the reason for the consolidation of these bills, so you can harmonize and produce one bill, one document that takes into account every interest. Coming back to what the senior advocate talked about countries or where this has happened, yes, I know that in Canada, we have a similar commission, in Nepal, in the Philippines, and several others. So it's not about saying that it's just about elections or so. Everybody understands the problems of this country, but in the crux of it is that of leadership. We must fine-tune the process that produces leaders. We must
challenge
fine-tune the process that produces credible elections.
Yes, that challenge is significant, but the question is, a number of questions to ask, of course, within the 4 of us, my colleagues. Why take so long? What do we do going forward? We'll explore more of that when we return from this break. Please stay with us. With us. Honorable Imana, you were responding to my colleague the other time. Perhaps you may want to land on that with this question. Perhaps, I mean, you've referenced the fact that there are some countries that have the same law and all of that. So perhaps there needs to be some kind of background to it so that people can understand. This conversation, as Bukola mentioned earlier, is not just starting now. And there are those who would argue, how come it was perhaps initially shut down in the National Assembly, and now it has gotten to a point where there is a public debate on it. So perhaps there is a need for some background onto why it was shut down previously and how come we got here now.
Yes, thank you very much. I see you understanding how the legislature works. It will depend on the firmament and the thinking of the people at the time. But it does not erode the need for an idea or for a bill to come back or to be represented. No. The fact that it was shut down does not mean that it cannot come back. How long did it take us to pass the PIA?
But that's not to say, Honorable, just a second, Honorable. That is not to say that the challenge of ballot snatching and all those things were not as significant, if not more significant at the time. Remember, former late President Yar'Adua was saying that the process that brought him to power was flawed and needed some work. And so if it dates that far back, one is wondering, why would it be shut down when the challenge was that significant?
Yeah, well, it is important that the process is taken up at any time it comes up. That is our business. In my opinion, any piece of legislation or bill or proposal that's important, whether it fails to pass through in a previous assembly, does not mean that it cannot come back. The issue of electoral offenses have been with us since the beginning of elections in Nigeria. And then we cannot blind our eyes to electoral offenses and issues. We must continue to attend to these issues, just like we did for the Electoral Act. And of course, Nigerians are happy for it. We have seen the outcome of the Osun and the elections. And of course, it gives more hope to Nigerians as to what to expect in 2023. So the fact that this commission bill has come up now does not mean that it was less important in previous assemblies or in previous years. It is here now. Nigerians have made their contributions, and we'll get through the process and see how it goes. But it's as important that, as it is that we must push for the fine-tuning of our electoral processes. We must push to ensure that we have sanctity and dignity in the processes, and people must understand that there must be do's and don'ts in our electoral regime at any given time.
Well, Honorable Aniekan, I wonder if there is more to the interest, the renewed interest, than meets the eye, you know, for lawmakers on this one. But I'd like to quickly come to Senior Advocate Osigwe with this one. I'm glad you followed the report before the conversation started, and I recall that the INEC chairman was saying that we must go after the electoral offenders. We must go after, I noted he specifically said, the high-profile sponsors of electoral offences. And if you were to look for high profile, you can't look any further. I hate to be direct, but it is the politicians now who are passionate and vigorously pursuing the electoral the bill for an act to create an electoral offences commission. Is this significant for you, Senior Advocate Osigwe? That it is the politicians who are demanding this now?
Not at all.
Yes, go
Not
ahead.
at all.
Tell us why it is not significant.
Because even while these politicians are pushing for, the enactment of this law, it has not stopped them from stockpiling money to buy votes on election day. He has referred to Ekiti and Osho, and we all read media reports about how votes were openly being bought and paid for. How many persons have been prosecuted? The problem is in our will to enforce the laws, not about where the laws will be enforced. And I keep insisting we must draw that distinction. Somebody wants an electoral offences commission. If people use money to corrupt electoral offences, they can be prosecuted under the money laundering laws we have in place by the EFCC. If people use violence to intimidate voters, to destroy electoral materials, to manipulate the electoral system, they can be prosecuted under the existing laws we have.
Then,
that's why
Mr. Osigwe,
I challenge them
Mr.
to
Osigwe,
produce facts and figures.
If I may come in there now, if there's no altruism in the intention of the lawmakers to pursue an electoral offences commission, the establishment of a commission to try electoral offences, what really is the interest in it for you?
I mean, it was interesting hearing your colleague, or was it you, say that the leader of the House did not know about this. In what parliament does a law come up for debate without being presented by the leader of the party in power or those proposing it? 4 persons, 4-member bills being presented for reading and the leader knew nothing about it. That should tell us so much. And that's why I say some people simply want it to be said, I have passed the law, so that when they go to their constituency, I'm the one that proposed this law. I presented this bill before the National Assembly. For some people, it's a matter of ego. I am the one that did it. And I'm certain that not much thought was given to the reason why these bills were stepped down in the past. And not much improvement may have been made. Maybe because the INEC chairman said, oh, we need to have an electoral offences tribunal commission. We're overwhelmed. And somebody dusted up these bills and decided to push for them to get back on the front burner. And I keep insisting, can somebody show us that it is imperative or that the present court system has failed or proved incapable of trying these offences? Can somebody give us the figures of not cases reported, but cases successfully investigated and charged to court in respect of these matters? And aside from the EFCC, and maybe a few times by the police, how much? And like the EFCC position on the matter, they said that the capacity of the law enforcement agencies to investigate and try this and prosecute these cases should be enhanced. And that should be our focus. Not creating special courts, for goodness sake.
So, Honorable Mana, perhaps
we can't continue to go on like this. We can't and can't.
Yeah, your point taken. Honorable Mana, would you like to respond to some of the poses raised by the senior advocate, and perhaps to also add to the concern that perhaps if the problem is lack of personnel, then INEC should be strengthened with personnel to try electoral offences so that the federal government is not burdened with extra cost on the wage bill of agencies?
Yes, I completely agree with the senior advocate on the issue of cost of governance and all of that. But frankly speaking, electoral issues, electoral matters, and the particularly issue of electoral offenses has lived with us here since independence, since the beginning. So must we continue like this? We must devise new ways and new means of seeing how we can make this process better. And that is, here's my point. I think we must not rely on a system that has not worked. It has not worked from the beginning of our independence to date. If we, I don't know how else we are going to get this done if we don't specialize these things and get agencies that will be focused. We can reduce cost of governance in different areas, but there are important things that we need to address. So at the crux, I insist, at the crux of the leadership of this nation and of getting things to work is the electoral process, the process of leadership recruitment.
That point is clear, quite
ensuring that people do what they ought to do.
Two things
and then
come
we
up
now
here.
have those who will now focus on these issues specifically and ensure that we get justice as to when we should get them in the manner that we should get them.
So is it fair to then say that the posturing of the House or the Assembly is that they will go ahead and pass this law, no matter whatever perspectives are there?
No, that cannot be the posturing. It cannot be the posturing. In my opinion, the making of a law goes through very detailed processes. And of course, it's gone through first and second reading, it's gone through...
Yeah, that's normal, that's the process.
It's gone through public hearing.
Now, speak to the concerns raised.
Various opinions have been harnessed and they will be incorporated. That's how it works. If it's not good enough, of course it won't go.
No, because I think everybody's on the same page in terms of something needs to be done about electoral offences.
Yes.
They all agree.
Yes.
But what and how it should be done is where the bone of contention is now, I reckon. And the thing, what the SAN has also alluded to is that, well, we have to show or demonstrate that the courts have not done what they're supposed to do, or that these cases, this amount of cases have been successfully investigated and not the ones that are being investigated. And then it's now interpreted as though it's a failure or it's a big problem with the entire system. Because if you create a special court now for this, what are the chances that these same problems won't surface?
Yeah, I believe that the commission will be focused.
Are the police not focused?
They will be focused on that particular issue.
On just that?
On that
every 4 years?
It's big enough.
Every 4 years?
870,000 cases from 2011. How can we really get through them so quickly?
We'll focus on that every 4 years.
It's not an easy process. We don't, mark you, we don't have one election every 4 years. We have off-season elections. We have several other things happening in between. An electoral offense is not just about one election. You could have a national election like we're proposing in 2023. Of course, we had off-season elections and several other elections. So I think it's important we understand these issues, look at the merits and demerits, and then see what works for the generality of Nigerians. In my opinion, I think we should harness all of the opinions and see how it works. Because this is how the legislature works. It's not because members sponsored bills or maybe there's an executive bill and then automatically it becomes law. No, that's not how it happens. How it happens is that various opinions, debates, and viewpoints will be harnessed. And of course, if there is a reason for issues not to get through, Nigerians will see that.
Yeah,
but if there is enough reasons like we have today, we have seen the myriad of electoral problems, and of course, we need to tackle this thing and nib it at the root of it.
The way you speak, it looks like this bill is already a fait accompli. It's going to come. No. It's going to come to life.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's how you sound.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I personally believe in it.
Okay.
So, in my opinion, I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
I personally believe in it. Of course, you have every other person has the right to hold his or her opinion on this. But this is my opinion, and I think it's the right thing to do, considering how this nation is, how it works, the size of this country, the quantum of problems, the number of political units,
so
the number of wards.
I want to come to the problems,
yes,
you know, that bedevil our country, and I think part of the points that the senior advocate has raised is the fact that, you know, for almost every agency that you point to. Many agencies of government are not performing at their optimal. They're not performing
Yeah,
at
the
their
issue of
optimum
performance
best.
is
So
not that of the
question,
legislature.
no, just a moment. The thing right now is it that, you know, we're ignoring what will seem to be the elephant in the room? The fact that it is because our agencies are performing below par. That's why we're unable to tackle something as straightforward as electoral offences. And rather than look for how to tackle that, we think that creating another, you know, special offences commission will be the solution to that. Isn't that what exactly the issue is?
No, I understand the point is made, but it doesn't take away the business of lawmaking and oversight. So looking at that's essentially what we're elected to do. And in our opinion, if we could find an idea good enough and propose them, of course, it goes through the baking to see if it comes to light. Of course, the opinion of Nigerians and various viewpoints will be harnessed to see how this works out for Nigerians. But coming back to the issue of agencies performing or not performing, or that is strictly an executive function. Ours is oversight. Yes, we have a duty
Oversight
to oversight
over
them.
the government agency, over the executive
I agree.
arm
Ours
of
is
government.
oversight.
Indeed.
So where we have to oversight, we need to make those complaints and raise those issues, which is what you are seeing every day. I think the Parliament must be commended for bringing up so many issues that are bedeviling this country in different. So that is our job, and we must continue to do this.
Yes, but the
and I
question
think
is,
we
to
have
what
done
end,
that.
how well have those issues been resolved to produce results? That's the question. How, for instance, INEC, you had this many cases. What was hindering you from being able to prosecute it? Is a lack of capacity? What if there was another desk? What if, you know, people were employed? These are questions. So when these issues are raised, for instance, to what end are they raised? Is it just for them to be captured in the media?
No, they are raised to be solved, and you can solve them in different ways. You can solve them through internal mechanisms if you want. If you feel that will solve the problem, of course, you can also solve them by creating a completely new idea that you think will help solve the problem.
So let me ask you about this. When the senior advocate raises the issue about our current financial state and how we're almost borrowing, I think, to even pay salaries, you know, does it really make sense that where we are right now, we set up another agency?
For me, if an agency is important enough, it could be set up. If it's important enough, we can make savings and cuts from different areas. There are areas that are more important than others. And I did say, and I'll continue to say, that the crux of this thing lies in our electoral process and the recruitment of leadership. If we get that right, so many other factors will run through seamlessly. Once we get leadership right, and once we get our electoral process right, and we get Nigerians to believe in the electoral process, and Nigerians to know that if you go for an election, you elect a leader, it's because he was truly elected. He was elected devoid of malpractices, offenses, and all of that. So we will hold such a person accountable. Leadership is critical, and leadership recruitment is at the crux of the whole all of this. If we have the right type of leadership, I think we would have solved so many of our problems ab initio.
Let me quickly throw this last one to the senior advocate. Mr. Oshigwe, I was wondering if, because part of what I heard you say, and you emphasize that, is our current financial state. Assuming our financial status were to improve, would you really have a problem with the setting up of this Electoral Offences Act Commission, assuming it finally sails through? Would you really have a problem with it?
Absolutely, I still have a lot of problems with it. I pointed out to our present situation and also pointed to the fact that we keep setting up agencies without really giving a projection of their effect on our finances, to also show that sometimes not much thinking goes into these bills. Not much thinking goes into gathering statistics to justify our argument. And it's a contradiction in terms, if you ask me, for leaders who oftentimes emerge through violation of electoral processes and are still violating it, to pretend to be the ones who care so much about this.
How much more statistics do you want? If we have over 800,000 cases since 2011 and we've only been able to successfully prosecute 60,000.
Doesn't that speak to you about inefficiency in the system? these cases, mind you, are still being investigated. They have not been charged to court. And I keep drawing that distinction. If cases were reported and we are tallying up the numbers without trying to find out why haven't the investigation of these cases been concluded? Why haven't cases been charged to court? And then suddenly we want to set up a court. When the things that should get us into the court, we have not asked questions why they haven't been done or why they are not being done. A gentleman from Kaduna boasted that he made so much money because he was a delegate to the party's House of Assembly and the state gubernatorial and whatever primaries. A minister, a former minister, stated that people were induced to vote in the primaries. These things are not being investigated. Doesn't that speak to you about lack of will to do what we should do? And that's why I talked about separating the law enforcement agencies, insulating them from politics, in training efficiency and putting the right persons. Is it an issue of staffing? Is it an issue of funding? Is it an issue of lack of professionalism?
All right.
Because if we don't ask the critical right questions, we'll be doing the wrong thing. And we can't continue doing the wrong thing and expecting to get good answers.
All right, Mr. Osigwe. Well, in conclusion, Honorable Domana, what is the next step or next phase after the public hearing has held?
Well, of course, that gets into the report stage. That will be the harnessing of all of the shades of opinion and so on to weigh the pros and cons and to actually know if Nigerians truly want this or not. If the civil society and all of those stakeholders truly want this or not, of course, harness their inputs and see how this could be fine-tuned. That's how it works.
When you talk about if Nigerians want this, Nigerians want many things. Nigerians want many politicians to resign because they can't perform. But Nigerians never get what they want in those cases. So this time, I think it's what the politicians, the House of Reps members or National Assembly want that they eventually do. So it's not really what Nigerians want.
Actually, Tamilin, is a proposal. Truth is that Nigerians are represented by different sets of opinions. Civil society, of course, politicians, different organizations.
Okay, but above all else, the
so
financial consideration is huge in this country. If we lack funds, if we're borrowing to pay salaries, that has to be considered. If the government wants to implement our own reports,
we should do better.
They need to consider some of those.
We need to do better than that as a nation.
I guess we'll wait and see. We'll look towards all of that and hope that the decisions that will be taken will be in the best interest of the country. So we have to thank both gentlemen, Honorable Aneka Nomana, Member, House Committee on Public Affairs and Media, as well as Mr. Afam Osigwe, Senior Advocate of